I wrote the creedal imperative really for good evangelical friends who belong to churches that aren't confessional, that don't subscribe to one of the great creeds or confessions of the church, because I think that many of the things that they value, orthodoxy, a high view of Scripture, etc., can actually be best protected by churches that have proper confessions connected to a self-conscious form of church government or polity. Creeds and confessions need to be highlighted because they are one of the means by which the faith is transmitted from age to age. Paul talks about the tradition in his letters. He tells Timothy to hold fast to a form of sound words. He clearly thinks that the gospel is something that transcends time and can be communicated from generation to generation. Creeds and confessions are an attempt to provide a form of sound words by which the gospel can be passed from father to son, from mother to daughter, from generation to generation. I also think creeds and confessions are important because they set before the church theological ambition. The criteria for joining a church should be set as low as the grace of God sets the standard. Anybody who confesses with their mouth that Jesus is Lord and believes in their heart that God raised him from the dead shall be saved. The standard for church membership should be fairly low. The standard for eldership, however, should be set high, and that's because the elders are those responsible for bringing congregants along to maturity in the faith. That maturity has practical aspects, but also has theological aspects. And if you have a doctrinal confession that has only 5 or 6 points, you're never going to be able to persuade your people that any more than those 5 or 6 points are really important. If you have an elaborate confession, such as the Westminster Standards or the 3 Forms of Unity, you lay before the people an ambitious standard of where you hope they will be in terms of their theological understanding as they grow as Christians. Creeds and confessions are not only useful for office bearers, I think they're very, very useful for lay people as well. At the simplest level, there is nothing like the shorter catechism that contains as much theology in so few pages. If you want to carry around with you a wealth of theological information, a wealth of theology, buy yourself a copy of the shorter catechism. You can fit it in your pocket and you've got more bang for your theological buck there than in almost any other book you would care to purchase. One would also bear in mind that many of the standards, particularly the catechisms, were put together with a deliberately pastoral purpose in mind. So the Heidelberg Catechism, for example, uses the first person singular a lot and points the believer constantly to Christ and constantly what particular doctrines are meant to mean for the individual believer as part of the church. The Westminster Shorter Catechism is less pastoral in its tone, but provides great answers to questions such as, what happens after I die? What does Christ's office as king mean? Good, succinct answers to many of the kind of questions that lay people raise on a regular basis. You look at the Lutheran catechisms, they're particularly fascinating. Luther, of course, was the first question and answer catechist in the history of the church who'd been a father before he wrote the catechism. And therefore there's a wonderful parental pedagogical tone to Luther's catechisms, where he first of all asks what something is and then asks for it to be explained. And as you read his catechism, you're being led by the hand through some of the greatest delights of Christian theology out there. So for lay people, the Westminster Confession, the catechisms, the history of confessions and catechisms in the church, I think it's truly delightful because it shows you the riches contained within the Bible in a beautifully succinct and easily accessible form.